Hello and welcome everyone to our NHL post-draft show. I'm Joe Chops here with the boys, Coach Frank, Bobby Bottles. Thanks for joining us, boys. Let's break it down. That was quite an exciting draft in Montreal this past weekend. Of course, the draft started with quite a buzz as the hometown Canadiens were first to pick, and they did not go with Shane Wright, who everyone thought, well, not everyone, but he was the consensus number one for a majority of the season. They ended up taking Slovak Juraj Slafkovsky. I apologize if I mispronounced his name.
Oh, you're good.
He just looks like a hockey player when you look at him. Big, strong. I'm sure he'll be a really decent player. Frankie, what was your impression when you saw the Habs take Slafkovsky and then watching Shane Wright slide 3 spots to Seattle at 4? Frankie, you're muted.
My bad. I think I wasn't shocked that it actually happened. Surprised a little bit, only because at the end of the day, like, Wright has been always the number one guy up until maybe the I know Slafkovsky had a hell of a tournament at the when they started at the juniors. He only played a couple games, but what he was doing was just like unreal, and he was very noticeable, obviously. I was just a little surprised because if you look at his numbers in Finland, he's playing in the top league in Finland. He hasn't really done much against obviously the top league there, but take it for what it is. I just find that when you can set yourself up for the next, 7-10 years down the middle, it's so hard to draft franchise centermen. And Wright is a top 6 player. He's going to be a top 6 player. And having a Suzuki Wright 1-2 center punch, you could be worse than that, especially on a rebuilding team like Montreal. So I'm a little shocked that they went winger because they don't have that next coming till they traded Kirby Dach, which
I was just going to say that, yeah.
Goes to show you they probably had that deal, which made them take Slafkovsky, right? So that's kind of, now it's starting to make more sense. But still, knowing what I've known from Shane Wright, he's always been a dominant player wherever he's played, and he's always played a year up. So having him adjust to the OHL with COVID and such, I thought obviously that hurt him a bit because his points per game wasn't up to speed or wasn't up to expectations that a number 1 overall player would provide, especially being an exceptional player, because he's one of the few kids that got exceptional status. I think the surprising thing for me is, till I read why after, it wasn't the surprise that he landed, that New Jersey skipped on him. It was the fact that Arizona skipped on him and took Logan Cooley over Shane Wright, who's also a centerman. And I read somewhere that the thought process between that was Arizona wants to build this around an American centerman and not a Canadian centerman. And like that right there goes to show how much of a Mickey Mouse organization you are where you don't take the best player available. Shane Wright should have went 3rd to Arizona. And he just landed in the lap of the Kraken. So you now have I keep calling them Berniers, but Beignet and Wright as your 1-2 for Seattle. That's a good core. So I definitely would have took him first. So interesting how it shaped up. New Jersey made the right play going with the defenseman though, Nemec.
Especially because they have Hughes and Hischier down the middle, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
They probably had it. They knew that Montreal was going to take either Slafkovsky or Wright, and that they were going to take the defenseman going into that. They had that all planned. When Gary Bettman announced that we have a trade, and that Montreal was trading up to 13, and then they were making another trade, the Bell Center was going to explode, because I think a lot of Habs fans thought that they were going to make that move up to 4 to get Wright as well, which would have been hailed in the annals of like draft history, right up there with Brian Burke getting the Sedin twins in terms of draft moves. But I still like the move they made. I really like acquiring Kirby Dach. He was a 3rd overall pick only a couple of years ago. He hasn't really shown the consistency yet, but he has a lot of promise. He's big, and I think the Habs they got a decent young core there with Caulfield, Suzuki, now Dach, adding him. I like what the Habs did at this draft. A lot of people like the Seattle's draft. I mean, you get Wright, who falls to you at 4, but then they also got Ty Nelson. I know, Bobby, you are a big Ty Nelson fan. They got him with their 2nd round pick. I think he was 34th overall.
No, correct. 3rd round. They got him in the 3rd round.
78, I think.
Oh, my bad. Wow.
Yeah, complete steal for me. I think he's fantastic. I think he's like anybody watching the NHL, I've said he's kind of like, he reminds me of Ryan Ellis, but I think he's better. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Ryan Ellis. And everybody's going to say he's small, one of the most powerful skaters. He's one of the best players whenever he's on the ice. I mean, even in the OHL, I believe he led all rookies in points this year as a defenseman on a pretty good North Bay team. But yeah, I think Seattle, I mean, you get, Shane Wright, like Frank said, I think he's a top six forward, I think. And now you get, potentially a top 20 defenseman at some point in the league. I think Seattle had a really good draft.
Seattle had the 2nd most draft picks in the draft, and they used them all. They had 4 2nd-round picks, and they drafted with all those picks. And not just that, they had another 1st-round pick land to them in the 2nd round, Jagger Furcus, one of the best names in the draft. But he's had Mitch Marner-like comparables. That's how skilled and offensive created he was. And I was hoping the Leafs would take him if he would got the 38. But the other guy that's really good that taken before Nelson, who I know quite well, playing coaching against him, and also plays for Sudbury, is David Goyette. He was a projected player that landed them in the 2nd round. Seattle, I think, did have the best draft of all the teams, just considering where players were ranked and where they fell down. So, good value at their picks. So I think they were ahead by quite a margin. I think Montreal wasn't too far ahead, but the Kraken made a lot of those deals, both using actually some of the Leafs picks in the Giordano trade as well. Those were one of those picks that they made. So,
and I think they needed to, because their expansion draft sucked.
Oh,
they were awful.
Horrendous.
But you look at how Seattle's building compared to what Vegas did. Vegas, came out of the gate flying to make the Stanley Cup final, and then all of a sudden their trajectory is kind of rushed. They're making deals, they're flipping picks, selling on all their young players. Whereas Seattle, everybody had their guard up last year in that expansion draft. They weren't going to make the same mistakes again. So maybe Seattle's just taking a different approach, a more patient approach, in that we're going to build through the draft. We're going to find young players. We're going to build draft capital and stock the cupboards full of prospects. And then we can make moves later on. I don't mind it, man. I think that's a smart move. And the fact that they are starting with now Wright and Matty Beignets, man, that's impressive.
Do you guys I didn't think that Montreal was going from 13 to 4. I think that would have just required too much capital to move up. But were you guys surprised? I'm morally frank here. Were you not surprised, Montreal, when you weren't going to take Wright, almost didn't trade back and say, let's just try to get this kid at, maybe 3 or 4? Or do you think they ran the risk of saying we really don't want to lose this kid?
I don't even give that a thought, because you have the number 1 pick and you're hosting the draft. You're not trading back. The buzz in that city and the hype around that, they knew who they were taking. I just think the Kirby Dach deal solidified it.
Yeah, that takes stones. Sometimes, it's a blessing in disguise. We saw Cale Makar. We talked about a Colorado kind of falling. They should have been the first overall pick. They fall to 4. And maybe they don't take Makar at 1 because, you have those other guys. Sometimes, it's almost like a scapegoat to fall back. I know, I believe Vancouver had 5. They took Pettersson, who I think is fantastic. You can't take him almost at 1 or 2. That takes some stones to kind of go against, he was, I believe, Wright was the unanimous number 1 for a lot of people. So I give the Canadiens GM credit. That was, it would have been real easy to just say we're just going to take Shane, and let's see.
Everyone would have cheered and been happy, and
yeah.
The question I have is if you're the New Jersey Devils, knowing that Slafkovsky was the guy that you were going to take, and it was admittedly said that the Jersey was going to take Slafkovsky at 2, knowing that if Slafkovsky was taken 1 and you're going to take a defenseman at 2, why not trade back like Seattle to grab an asset? Because Arizona was probably going to take Cooley anyways, right? So if you know you're going to take that defenseman at 4 and Arizona's not going to take it, that's where you make that deal to say, okay, throw me another asset and we'll move back to 4 and take the defenseman, which Nemec was supposed to go to, in that range anyways. So that's where I would have thought.
You guys think like they probably have all this mapped out before? Like I'm sure like Seattle makes a call to New Jersey, like, hey, if they pass, what's it going to take to get to number 2?
Absolutely. And you know why I know that, Rob? Because when I'm in my fantasy football draft and I know I'm drafting at 10, I say, well, if this guy's taken here and this guy's taken here, I know I'll have this group of players available for me. And that's how you know. See?
Good call.
Thank you. Frankie, your boy, who our friend of the show, we had him on, we got to get him on again. Nicky Moldenhauer gets drafted by the hometown Maple Leafs. How excited and pumped were you when you heard that? I know the Rogers funny enough, the Rogers interruption, if you're from the States, Rogers is the biggest telecommunications company in Canada. They had a full out, what would you call it? Outage of their
network outage.
Yeah, network outage. And nobody could use their phones, including people at the draft. So they had to use the landlines at the draft tables. And we didn't know exactly what was happening. We had to go to Starbucks. I had to go to my dad's, who has another internet provider, to figure out what was happening. So, Frankie, tell us how you found out that your boy was drafted by the Leafs.
Oddly enough, I kept refreshing as much as I could, using a mobile hotspot to refresh my phone and my computer. And when I saw the Leafs trade back to 70. I can't remember where he was taken. Anyways, in the back half of the 3rd round, I said, if they know who they want to get, and they could probably get another asset to do that. Just the whole idea with the Chicago Steel connection, and Ryan Hardy from the Steel now being on the Leafs, one of their 26 assistant GMs. I know they have a history with the Chicago Steel. It felt right, and I was ecstatic. As soon as the coverage came back, I texted his dad, and I saw. You probably see some of the videos on Twitter that the Leafs put out post draft, and his reaction with his family and stuff. It's just incredible. It's so rewarding. Like I had a quick chat with him the other day. Then via Instagram we had a chat. He's still it's still not sitting in, and it won't. It'd be really cool when he gets to play in the development camp with the other selections and some of the invites. Looking at him in a Leaf jersey, he just looks like a fan who wears a jersey to the game, but it's actually got his name and the year. It's really surreal. So, and with that, I will say 2 other boys from our team were drafted, which is a great accomplishment. I'm really proud of them. Matthew Morden, who was our captain, the Titans team that won the Ontarios. He went in the 5th round to Arizona. He plays at St. Andrews College. And Luke Devlin, son of Matt Devlin, the play-by-play broadcaster of the Raptors, played for us as well. He's also at St. Andrews College. I believe he's going to Boston, if I'm not mistaken. I probably got that wrong, but I know he's committed to the NCAA. May have been it's either Boston or Princeton or Harvard, one of those two. But he was drafted by the Penguins in the 7th round. Like I said, I'm a proud coach, and some surprises too. Rob and I had a little quick chat about this. I'm surprised at some of the kids who weren't drafted, to be honest with you. Pano Fimis being one of them. I know him very well, but a 2nd overall pick in the OHL. Yeah, that's a missed opportunity by some teams. And same with Coach Adelic from our team, who played the World Under-18s with Canada. He didn't get drafted as well. So, hey.
They correct me if I'm wrong. They still could get drafted next year as an overager, correct?
Yeah, they could.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Congratulations to Frankie's boys. Hey, you got drafted into the show despite having Frank as your coach. So congratulations. That's awesome.
That's one little bit of adversity. I mean, you want to talk about adversity, this 04 group. People probably don't know this, but COVID kind of hit during the GTHL finals for this group. So
yeah.
Like, and then they miss out on their next year, which would have been their first year of the OHL. And then now on the day of the draft, the biggest service provider in Canada goes down. So some can't even track. Like this group, this 04 loop had a bunch of adversity.